Good. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being with us today. My name is Francois Candelon. I'm leading the BCG Henderson Institute, which is his think tank, research arm. And I'm very pleased to share, let's say, findings of a new experiment. We'll explain a little bit more what it is about with my colleagues. Lisa.
Hello, everybody. I'm Lisa Krayer, a principal with Boston Consulting Group, and I've been helping Francois lead and Dan lead the experiments that we're going to talk about today.
Dan.
I'm Dan. I'm a managing director and partner in Stockholm, and I'm part of our BCG X team, which is the team at BCG that does not work on slides so much. So which, as you may have seen, is not 20% roughly of our revenue is AI related these days. So it's a big deal for us. Yeah, I didn't do the slides.
Okay, I didn't either. So basically, just to give you a little bit of context, since ChatGPT emerged in November 2023, we had a lot of benchmarks on GPT-4 versus Claude 3 versus Llama, but we believe that the most important thing is about the collaboration between human and AI. How will we make them collaborate? What will it look like? And of course, you can have surveys about what people think about and so on, which I believe are useless because we don't know. So we tried to build evidence-based insights. And to do that, we wanted to have experiments, but we wanted these experiments to be scientific. And this is why the one we did with the DCube Institute, with Karim Lakhani, with Ethan Mollick, with Eli Lifshitz, was really about, so it was scientific. The second thing that we wanted it to be real, so it's with real professionals on real tasks, sanitized to avoid any confidentiality issue, of course, but real professional, real tasks, and large scale. We had more than 700 people participating to the first one. And we did actually, if you move to the next slide, we did two things. So the first one was more about how can AI augment the way you do the tasks you do in your daily life. So how will it impact your performance? We worked more on performance than productivity, but really, and we saw that in some cases, it was human and AI was stronger than AI, than human. In some others, it was not the case. So it went to this article that called the Jagged Frontier. But then we wanted, and this is what we will present you today, to see whether we can, with AI, to a certain extent, upskill our resources. What do we mean? We try to see whether our consultants that had no or limited data science capabilities were able, thanks to ChatGPT, in that case we used ChatGPT, it would have been another LLM, but it was ChatGPT. Using ChatGPT, could they actually solve data science issues? Okay, and so this is what we will present, but if you go, I have a big disclaimer. You are the first ones to see these results. We stopped the data collection 10 days ago.
Oh, wow.
So it's really hot from the press. So this is just preliminary, and I think we'll have the opportunity to deep dive for many times and many more months about the findings. So Lisa, maybe some findings.
Yes. All right. So I want to start off by explaining the experimental structure. We wanted to understand not just can they do one task, but we needed to isolate various things that a data scientist is expected to do and to be able to understand. And so we created 3 tasks and worked with data scientists to make sure that these were very representative of something that they would need to do in their day-to-day work. So the first task was predictive analytics. This is, they had to take a bunch of historical data and see if they were able to create a predictive model to determine what that, and this was gaming for this one, determine if they were able to predict the games in the future. And based on that, identify if their models were sound and if they would actually be willing to make an investment or not, based on how predictable they thought the data was. The next one was focused in on data cleaning, but this was not about data cleaning, it was about programming. And we had people in our group that our participant group that had never programmed before in their life, had never even written a Hello World script before, and they joined our participant list as well. The last thing that we wanted to understand is how well they would be able to do statistical analysis. This is the education that data scientists receive is really understanding the statistical significance of their results. To do this, this last one, we wanted to make sure that people had to find when ChatGPT is wrong, and would they know when ChatGPT is wrong. So this one wasn't so much a task where they had to do a statistical analysis problem. It was a view of, if ChatGPT gave you this, and we know that there's something wrong in this, would you be able to find out where it went wrong and fix it? And so that's a view of, it's kind of that breaking point of, if ChatGPT isn't getting it right, what would you do? And we'll be able to see the behaviors around that. So we recruited 525 consultants and data scientists. We had about 40 data scientists in the group. The data scientists were the baseline. And then if you go to the next slide, I'll talk through the logistics here. So we had a group that used ChatGPT and a group that did not use ChatGPT, and then the data scientists were the baseline, so that we could actually grade everyone against the data scientists to see how close they were able to get to somebody who does this in their day-to-day life. We also provided a little bit of training for everybody. None of this was data science training. It was how to use the tools that are at your disposal. So with ChatGPT, we gave people prompting best practices, so something around few-shot prompting, chain of thought reasoning. We also gave them an explanation of how to use the data analyst tool, previously called Code Interpreter, and make sure that they knew how to, so there's like little boxes you need to check to make sure that you can actually see the code that Code Interpreter is running. So we made sure that they knew where to find all that and just functionally how to use the tool. For the group without ChatGPT, we wanted to make sure that they actually knew what resources existed. So specifically, Stack Overflow is probably the most useful thing at their disposal, but we also showed them like Khan Academy, Python documentation, and some effective searching strategies that we hope they already know, but they might not have known the other tools that like Stack Overflow. Many of them had never used that before. So that's the experimental structure.
And maybe if you have questions, because I think we are a small group, happy to take questions as well as we're going. So I don't know if the protocol is clear.
And if not, any questions? We can dive into the results, which is on the next slide.
I do have a question.
Oh, yeah.
So the consultants who were selected, was that across age groups? Was it just given who consultants are at BCG? Were they skewing? Yeah. What can you tell us a little bit about the demographics?
Absolutely, that's a great question. So we did a broad spam to our entire organization globally and said, please sign up. And so we have people, the distribution is across our entire organization of associates and consultants. I will say all associates and consultants are typically in the I would say the 25 to 35 age range.
Yeah, 25
Yeah.
to 32, 33.
Exactly.
But it is global. It was really global. So there is, in terms of age, it's based on the fact that they are consultants, the contributors. They were not project managers. They were contributors, so consultants. But you had, let's say, males, females, people from India, from Japan, from Europe, from the US, and so on. So it was a global, and what is interesting, maybe, which is that we didn't find, based on the demographics, real differences, significant differences.
Absolutely.
But they are all BCGers, so maybe there is a.
I have a homogeneity bias.
But was the test done in their local language, or do they have to convert back into English? Or
It was all in English. Although I will say that in the results that people submitted, some people submitted in their own language, and we didn't knock any points for that. We just converted the language.
I have a question. Were you trying to solve a problem? How did you come up with, oh, we need an experiment on this?
That's a great question. So I'll have Dan actually answer that one.
Yeah, well, there's just a lot of factors in this, because I think when we're looking at how we understand how we and our clients work with this technology, one thing is, okay, can we give people tooling that helps them get better or more efficient with the tasks they know how to do? Another is, can we understand what they can do with something that they have no idea what they're doing on, right? And this is relevant for us, this organization I mentioned, we have 3,000 people around the globe that are engineers, data scientists, designers, people building things. And we're constantly evaluating what does the structure of that organization look like over the years to come. And if we have something that levels the playing field a bit, or that enables people to get up to speed on more technical skills over time, obviously that would have a pretty massive implication for our team, but then, like I said, our clients as well. So if we're planning out, what does their sort of talent strategy look like for the years ahead, super important for us.
And it will come, because basically we need, of course, to have strategic workforce planning, and you will see that we are trying at the end of this presentation to summarize a bit at the moment after 10 days our findings or our main ideas on what are the key questions for every step of, let's say, our organization, people and organization, let's say, element, from strategic workforce planning to team structuring to learning and development and so on.
Should we dive into the results?
Yeah.
Now,
It works. So what you're going to see here is that the top line across all graphs is the data science baseline. So this is how the consultants with ChatGPT and without ChatGPT performed compared to the data scientists. And you'll see across the board, there's a big treatment effect that people were able to do this. So, like I mentioned, there were people in the group of consultants that had never written a line of code in their life. And here, they're able to get 17% of what a data scientist was able to accomplish. And I will say, all of these tasks were done within a time frame as well. They were required to do them within 90 minutes. So within 90 minutes, they were able to solve a data cleaning problem. The predictive analytics is a little bit less of an extreme hike here, but I want to caveat this, that in this predictive analytics problem, you're able to get a lot of different correct answers. And this is just the mean absolute difference from the consultant's answers compared to the data scientist's answers. And when there's more than one right answer, the results can look a little bit like it's not performing as well as they may have, but we'll have to dive into that more given it's fresh off the press.
So you said that's the beaten average. So what's the spread on that? So other people, what's the confidence at 95% on that?
So as in like the
spread?
standard distribution
Yeah,
here?
standard deviation, yeah.
So the standard deviation across this is quite broad, especially for the predictive analytics one, because there's so many answers there.
Yeah.
So it is quite broad. On the data cleaning and the statistical analysis, the distributions that we found, they don't really change from without consultants to with consultants, they just move up. So it's roughly the same distributions across the board, but like I said, this is hot off the press stuff, so we're still deep diving this. But this is what it looks like. It looks like we do a shift in performance.
Interesting. Question over here.
Oh, yes.
So if I just look at the middle graph, does that mean both groups had 90 minutes?
Both groups had 90 minutes.
And so the negative 66 versus 17, so it's 50 points.
Yes.
They did 50 points better using the tool.
Yeah.
Does that mean it's 50% more efficient with the same level of accuracy? Does that mean it's 50%? Is it done in 45 minutes versus 90 minutes?
Well, I would say that this is I would caution you to view this as a efficiency problem versus a accuracy problem. So how I would view this is, let's say you give somebody back in the day before ChatGPT and you told them, you now learn Python to do this problem.
Okay.
How long would it take them to be able to solve that problem? Might have been like several days. Now they could do it in 90 minutes. And so in terms of how you do it as good as a data scientist, I'm going to say that if a data scientist was handed ChatGPT, they could probably knock this out really, really fast. So that's why I'm like, I don't necessarily know the efficiency is that's what I would anchor on. It's more they can do this in 90 minutes when it might have taken them like 3 weeks to figure it out before.
Or not to be able to do it at all.
Right.
And I think that this is where, and we will see next page, I'm teasing you. No, keep that one. It's a teaser. You can already see that minus 70%, 17%. So it might have implications. What does it mean? Maybe we will be able to restructure or reconfigure our teams to have maybe data scientists coming later, because a significant part of data cleaning in Python can be made by traditional consultants.
Sorry if you've already gone over this, I apologize, but data scientists, were they using Chat GPT?
They were not.
And they had 90 minutes as well?
Exactly.
Good question.
Was there any rewards to
Good question
got
as
it
well.
for 7 minutes, 17 minutes, or just any rewards to the teams?
No, but I think that for us, I would say that for this type of questions, it's less a question about 90 minutes is good enough. So it was more for us the question of the accuracy in a given time frame that is relevant for a task to be done than trying to make them, okay, 60, 50, and so it's not a 100-meter, let's say, race. So it's really something where, okay, in a decent period of time, can you provide the right level of accuracy to do a task that otherwise you would not have been able to do?
But to your point, we do want to make sure that we're incentivizing people to perform. And so what we did in the recruiting process is we encouraged first encouraged everybody to sign up, but in the recruiting process, we also told them that based on their performance, if they're in the top 50% relative to their cohort, so we're not gonna grade the ChatGPT group the same as the non-ChatGPT group, that wouldn't be fair, but they would receive some form of recognition to their career development committee, which doesn't necessarily, it's more of a lip service thing, it's not, but it's nice. It's a nice thing for people to feel like, oh, I'll get recognized if I do perform well, which we did see, I think, encouraged people to perform.
So let's move to the next one so that we
move along. Absolutely. Okay, so one of the things that I wanted to show here is we actually looked at making sure that we weren't just doing the results based on people who would already have experience. So for each of these tasks, we segmented out based on their previous experience, analytics experience, so that's whether or not they had used machine learning models before, how often they do data analysis in their work, and the least experienced were the ones that don't do data analysis very often. Then in coding, this was a basic question that we asked to them to tell us how often they code for work. And then statistical analysis, we did this one based on their education. And so across the board, everyone gets an uplift, though we do see, especially for the data cleaning and statistical analysis, the background, of course, does give everybody a big boost, but we're still seeing a very significant treatment effect even for people without any experience whatsoever.
and so you can see, sorry, 1 minute, you can see that for the experienced one or the education, basically there is no or zero, there are almost zero difference. Meaning that this is really an opportunity to reconfigure, to think in a different way with implication, as I said, on our strategic workforce planning, on our team, let's say, configuration and so on.
So you mentioned the sign-up rate, and you've done this call for lab rats.
Yes.
Sorry to call your consultants lab rats. I used to be one. But
We've sort of shamelessly done this.
yeah, you call your lab rats. After you've done these series of tests, what's been the response rate of people signing up for this after each time? Has that increased, or has it generally stayed flat?
About the
same.
same.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's a significant request of their time during a very busy schedule for consultants, as you I'm sure can imagine. But yeah, about the same. I think people are really excited to participate in this, just given how cutting edge this is and our sort of lack of institutional understanding of what this means for upskilling and workforce planning.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on why the least experienced under predictive analytics had a better outcome than the
That is something I want to dive into myself. So no, unfortunately, I can give you ideas, but right now I don't have solid info on that.
I have a hypothesis, but we'll get to that in a minute.
Yeah. All right. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to you
okay,
the
great.
rest.
So I mean, I mentioned at the start that we want to understand how this works for learning and development as well, right? Not just can people do this, but do they learn something while they're doing it? And at least with the construct of this experiment, where this is sort of one shot and we're not framing the way that the technology is being used to guide people to learn something, maybe unsurprisingly, they don't, is sort of the short answer. And the way we tested that is by giving them a series of questions after the experiment had concluded that were about the tasks that they were just presented with. And what we see is across the board is you can kind of tell the sort of, consultants with and without, there's really no difference in terms of their retention, which I guess, again, is interesting. It definitely helps shape how we view the way that we arm our teams with this tech going forward. If we do want them to learn something, I think we need to be intentional about how we design this, or certainly look at a longer time horizon. One 90-minute window for one task is certainly not enough.
And I think that the other point that is important here is that we don't know yet whether there won't be any learning curve over time. If they do it 10 times, maybe they will learn. But I think this is why you have the two words, immediately for sure. Immediately we can say that it doesn't bring anything. But inherently, we have the question whether they need to be really willing to learn. And this is something that we will see over time. But as I said, we are just scratching the surface. Yes?
Are you considering, for the ones with no experience, actually bringing them back to do a follow-up now that they have a little bit of experience to see how well they do the next time around?
Yes, but look, maybe we don't know, but at the moment what we see is that we cannot find any correlation. So we don't know. But again, because at the end of this, I would like to have let's say a case team meeting with you and a brainstorming from you to that we can think about additional analysis or questions you have so that we can push this forward.
And, it seems pretty obvious looking at a slide, but when you look into the tasks that the teams were required to participate in, there are a lot of steps. And it does, even when you're working with ChatGPT and the code interpreter or advanced data analysis, it is an iterative approach. Like, it will write code, it will fail, it will understand that it failed, and then it will continue, right? And even with that iterative approach, while we have a team looking through it, how it's failing, what it's fixing, the steps it goes through, still, that's not retained, right? Which is interesting. So again, it means that we need to be quite intentional about how we design the interaction between our teams and these systems. It's not just going to work out of the box, at least in one shot, at one time. Yeah.
When you chose the content data science or data analytics, was that obviously that was intentional?
Yeah.
Because it has these steps versus some other squishy topic.
That's part of the reason. The second is that it's just for our setup, for our context, it's a really clear opportunity to identify those people that definitely do not have that experience, and we can compare them to people that we have hired and we are paying to work as professionals in a data science context.
Right.
It's just a sort of sense of scale that we have.
And one thing I'll just add to that, one of the big benefits of this type of study is really understanding how people are behaving at the cusp of what ChatGPT is really good at, or what any generative AI system is really good at. So it's very, very good, but it still is not perfect. And so understanding how people outside of their expertise are going to play with that field of expertise that they don't have, that ChatGPT has to some degree. And so our findings, in my opinion, can apply now, even as the technology shifts and change, because we'll understand how people behave right at that cusp. And I think this is a perfect time for ChatGPT to do that for data science.
And we should move on, because this is a super important point. Like, this is changing really fast. So I don't want you to take away as that, like, this is the state of where things are, this is what it can do. But really understand what this then means for us as we go into different iterations of this tech and the advanced capabilities it has. Also on that note, the limitations of this technology, I think we've shown in previous work, and this idea of the sort of jagged frontier, it's not always right. Like, it does make mistakes. And so part of working with this is not just did they complete the task, or did they get part of the way, but where are they falling over? Like, where does this not lead them to the right result? And so one thing we wanted to understand was their sense of confidence, and how that relates to over-reliance on the technology. And so what you can see on this is two groups of tasks that we asked our consultants about. Some that we are clear that ChatGPT cannot solve, and some which it can. And we asked the teams before and or without, and then the ones that had worked with ChatGPT on their degree of confidence, or asked them which ones did they think ChatGPT could solve. And what we see is that when our teams are actually working with the tech, it does perhaps increase their confidence in the tech, regardless of whether that technology can actually do that, right? Which is also interesting. And I think across the board, we do see maybe a degree of overconfidence in the technology itself, which then leads to another question of, okay, well, what do we do about that, right? And if we take that same cut that we were looking at, actually we haven't introduced this one yet, but if we cut the data based on which consultants have, how frequently do they work with this tech, because we roll this out to the entire firm, right? So they can work with this pretty much at any time. Some barely use it, some use it on a weekly basis, some use it daily, all the time. And this surprised me a little bit, right? I think the degree of confidence that they have, they're somewhat skeptical of the technology when they haven't worked with it at all. And when they worked with it a lot, they're also somewhat skeptical of it, maybe a healthy skepticism. It's those that are sort of just playing around with it a little bit that maybe have an unreasonable set of expectations around the tech. So perhaps there's also something for us to do in just incentivizing our teams to work with the technology to get more familiar with that jagged frontier, so that we can understand where it is helpful, where it is not. And there's another benefit to increasing that frequency. So if we again look at that same cut by use on rarely or weekly, daily, we can then see across 3 different questions around professional identity, right? So and you'll see these questions at the bottom of the slide, both last year when we ran an experiment and then this year. And what we see is clear, is that as they increase the work they do with this technology, it does improve their sense of how competent they are in the role, their level of autonomy, and whether their contributions will benefit others, which is fascinating. So I think there's 2 really good reasons out of that alone to drive more usage or adoption of the technology.
And this is something that we found as well in another research that we did, where basically by pushing the adoption, basically you are igniting a positive, a virtuous cycle, so that we can, because the more you use, the more you trust, and the more you trust in the right way, not being overconfident, and then the more you use and they learn, and as we all know, they say the worst day of AI is day one. So it's really important to do that, and I strongly believe that AI transformations are of a different nature than the others, because it has a massive impact on your professional identity, competency, sense of autonomy, sense of belonging, or relatedness. And so I think that we need to understand that, and this is the type of adoption that we'll have to trigger in our organizations. Because today what we see mostly are people saying, okay, let's get your being ChatGPT Enterprise, Microsoft Copilot, we send you this, go with it, it won't work. But what we see that when we trigger the adoption, then we're entering into this virtuous cycle.
That's super important as well. I think this technology is so broadly applicable that it is often difficult to understand what to do with it when just given it in your lap. And so, we've had to be very intentional about the way that we've rolled it out across our firm and in making it clear what is valuable about it. When to use this for what. And as we continue to do that, it builds this familiarity, which then also allows people to extrapolate a bit and say, okay, well, it was working for these 10 things. Now I can imagine for this next one, I can use it there as well.
Yeah, because it's not just using that, it's about as well redesigning your processes. Because if you just send this and without redesigning processes, then nothing will happen. Question?
Well, I was going to ask, can you give some examples of the things that you found were good triggers to start that nice virtuous cycle of adoption to continued use?
Yeah, so we've been working a ton on this by mapping out what people are spending their times on already, and not looking at the jobs or the roles, but on the specific tasks that people are working on, and then identifying, okay, well, if they were to have this one thing around, for us, critiquing a slide is a big part, and editing and working with it, iterating on a slide is a big part of the workflow for our junior teams. And so building in our context, a custom GPT that does that for them and provides that input then becomes very tangible and something they can work with.
Yeah, or getting access to knowledge.
Yeah.
So basically for us, it's a lot of time. So if by prompting, you're able to get access to BCG's knowledge management, it's really a great opportunity, and they save time. And therefore, but even with this, if you just give them the tools without accompanying them, so we had a massive change management approach. Let's say we inform, engage, train. So it's something that we really need to deep dive a lot.
I have a question. This morning when Ethan Malik presented the study, what he showed very well was, a lot of tasks you can multitask, but he also said the result was a minus.
Yeah.
The result was not as great as what a human can produce. A plus, it was a minus. So how did you analyze that and what's the impact? Because if I can do things faster and feel I have a greater confidence that it brings me, but the output is a minus. If I lead the straight of sounds, that means that I'm just mediocre in everything I generate.
Yeah, I mean, and you see, like, even though we're getting closer to where a data scientist can be, we're not exactly there yet, right? As well. So I think there's also not just the efficiency side, but just the quality of the work. Like there is a. So you want to?
No, please go ahead.
And as we start stringing together more complex systems that rely on agency of large language-based agents to control tools to accomplish tasks, that sort of we increase the probability that it goes astray when we look at stringing things together. So it is absolutely a very important question for us. It's not one that in this experiment we really spent a lot of time on.
And before we are going to more agencies, there is this question as well about how do you structure teams? Will you have one data scientist with someone that you can contact as a primus inter pares when you have a question, you're not sure, whatever? It's about the supervision. How do you structure to make sure that you have a supervisor that will tell you that no, it's mediocre, it doesn't work, this is not the output, the quality of output that you need to get. But as we were showing in one of the previous slides, the question is more about what do we lose if we don't know. The risk is that you don't know what you don't know. And this is why it is important to keep, at least at the moment, before we have to keep some data science capabilities really ingrained in the team. Yes?
It's a related question. For at least 15, 20 years, employers have been saying that critical thinking is the skill that they least see and they most desire. And yet we always ask associates and analysts to just know the subject and have the right answer without necessarily discerning. You just mentioned the supervisor. How do we teach that skill of discernment in this moment?
This is...
This worries me deeply.
No, but I agree. I think, and we'll come back to the questions we have, where we have on the impact on the people and the let's say the workforce and change management implication. We have more questions than real answers. But this question of discernment becomes a critical capability to teach. Curiosity, agility, adaptability, discernment. What does it mean to be confident? When should you be confident, not confident, becomes something really critical, at least for the next years to come.
Yeah. And I think what we have seen is that when we are able to break tasks down into smaller tasks to apply the technology, we do get a better result, even if it's at a small size, right? But we don't have any empirical evidence around that one yet. It's something I would really love to dig into.
And I have one other question where I don't have the answer, which is, how do you supervise when you were not trained?
That's my
Yes. I don't have the answer. I don't have the answer yet. Yes. So we'll try to get it soon. But it is really a key question for companies.
Yeah, you started to answer, but I don't know if you've given the answer. So I like the fact that you're getting into the human nature of it rather than can this technique versus be that technique on an absolute scale. But I'm just wondering, how are you measuring or thinking about how human nature fundamentally changes? So the story you've thread here is what I call a very dopamine-driven one. So it's all feel good, feel happy. But what about the bad stuff? How do you stop people cheating, or how does the fear, emotion start? Because a lot of this is actually, the machines are very logical, we're not. And really understanding how our illogical neurochemical imbalances interact with these, and how does that happen on an individual basis, but then on a whole cultural, company, organization-wide basis is super fascinating and frightening.
You want to start, or?
I say more questions than answers, I think. On this
I know.
No, but I will tell you that I think that this is something, we don't have the answer, but this is something that companies will have to monitor I think that companies will have to build an experiment capability in-house to see where it should work, where it should not work, what are the implications on humans, and we'll see. There is, from the previous experiment, there is one figure that we did not publish because the p-value was a bit high. We decided to stop the p-value at 0.5, and our p-value is there noise in the data? And p-value 0.5, and basically we had, that one was at 0.8 or 9, if I remember well, which is that the previous experiment was run in May 2023, 6 months after ChatGPT was launched. And we found that the people who intensively used ChatGPT for 6 months were less creative than the others. So, which means that, and so we don't know, so we said, okay, there is too much noise, we don't put it, because otherwise everyone will, no, and it's true that there was noise, but at least it showed that we don't know how people will react, what will be the imbalance. At the moment, we see that when there is adoption, it seems there is a virtuous cycle, which was true with traditional AI. We demonstrated it. It seemed that it is the same, or we see the same trends with generative AI. But will it last? How will the model evolve? How will people react over time? And I think this morning I found, if I may, that let's be a bit challenging, otherwise I would not be French. Is that these people this morning were lacking the dynamic perspective. Okay, oh yes, it can improve efficiency, people would get fired. Yes, but how? What does it mean? Not just for the society, but what are the other things that might emerge? Exactly the question that you're asking. After 2 years of using generative AI, what will happen? How will we feel? How will we, and this is one of my questions, how will we get promoted? Because this morning it was said, oh yes, but thanks to generative AI, it will democratize everything. Because the data sharing is just at the low level. It's not. People share data when they are at the low level, not when they are, because information is power. Blah blah blah. Okay, but how do you move to this power position if it's still one of your objectives? Will you be promoted, or will you be? Is it your augmented person that will get promoted? Augmented as because you're using ChatGPT, and maybe there will be people that will be turbocharged by Claude, or whatever. So I think there are plenty of questions there that will happen, and we don't know. But this is why experimentation will come. And I often use this image that we are at the beginning of the aviation experience. We are in 1900. When we do a flight, it's 300 yards. And we find that it's great, and it's true, it's great. But we're far from Lindbergh, and we're far from the Concorde. As you can see, I'm French still.
I had a chance to speak with Professor Malik about this earlier.
We
How
often
will we
disagree
feel?
together.
How will we? Well, and I also did my MBA in France, so I'm going to. I should say. We don't know how we will feel because we've never had a large-scale displacement of white-collar workers. Blue-collar workers have been displaced over and over again with every invention. And it could be interesting to go back in time and understand what is one's identity in a trade that has changed when like steam power arrives, or some other mechanical invention that rendered like the hands less important.
Yeah, so
and our identity, I think it's social class.
There are plenty of, let's say, white collar workers that were scribes, that were in
wealth, socioeconomic place, what your identity is when that is no longer.
So I'm
very curious. I'm sorry, I'm
I
taking
will
this
make
to
two comments there, and I don't have the answer. But first is that I find that the white collars, including, were much more brave when it is about, let's say, putting blue collars out of jobs than when it is about white collars. That's really clear. That's one point. And the second point, I believe, which is important as well, is that, but I forgot it. So I just had one.
Another question about the experimental design setup, and I feel like we've talked about this a couple of times throughout the presentation. Did you think about having another experimental cell around giving ChatGPT to data scientists? and then to see what the lift was and compare, because they're the experts. Like that's the baby step, right? You give the tool to improve the expert already before you get to the creating the generative AI data science agent. I didn't know if what was the lift there, and how like some of those graphs that you have in the middle around like perceptions of like trust in the tool, confidence in using it, et cetera. So I just would like to hear about the thought process.
So we one of the reasons we didn't give it to data scientists in this particular experiment is because actually there's a lot of academic research around that already to understand that lift that is going to happen. That being said, in our data, in this study, we did actually ask people about their use of ChatGPT, and even data scientists are very much enjoying this tool. And I will also throw out that at BCG, the data scientists love doing the really complex problems around like changing models, modifying models. And when we ran this experiment and talked to the data scientists about how would you feel if associates and consultants were able to do this? They were like, oh, thank goodness, I don't want to do that. So like that was the reaction we got. I'm not going to say that that was everyone because our sample size was really small. In terms of, we only had 40 data scientists that participated in this. But I think to this point is it's incredibly important to listen to people and not just make decisions, and talk to people about how, because we don't know how this is going to impact people's lives, and we won't know until we talk to them and truly take that initiative to listen.
And just maybe to add one more point, which is the fact that we knew, in a sense, we lack imagination, in the sense that we try to make people do tasks that we already know data scientists do. But we were trying to say, okay, and we were having debates, but we could not find with something really tangible about saying, okay, yes, but if we'll make data scientists with ChatGPT, what are the things that they could do and that they cannot currently do? And it was one issue. Sorry, because you had a question.
No, I think that actually is in line with my question. We heard this morning that part of what AI can do is to address the jobs where there's no joy, or take some of the problems off the plate for people who are doing that kind of work. And along the same lines, I guess my question is, what are the implications for strategy?
Yeah.
If these are all tasks that AI can do for us, what are the implications of all of this for solving strategic problems? Does it free us up to do that work, or will AI do that work? How does that all fit together?
Personally, we have a colleague who talks a lot about this being a great lever to remove the ugliest 4 hours of the work week, which I think is a nice way to frame things. And for sure, and anecdotally from our data scientists, we know it does remove a lot of the painstaking repetitive tasks, which they're very happy about. But if you think, beyond where this technology is going, and we talked about agency, if we're able to arm large language model-based agents to go and do research for us and synthesize the research and put together the slides. I mean, we are, of course, working on all of those things ourselves, because it would be naive to think that the work that we do in strategy and consulting would be somehow immune from what's going on with generative AI. So it for sure will be a factor.
Yes.
I actually work for a startup that's doing strategy AI work. And what we're finding is that it's greatly shrinking at least the starting point to getting to a quarters 5 forces or a SWOT, or instead of 6 or 8 or however many weeks and lots of people, it's greatly shrinking that cycle to give you a clearer starting point, whether it be mid-cycle, beginning cycle, otherwise. But I'm curious to see how this is changing BCG's business in terms of client expectations, consulting, consulting engagement cycles, ability to serve other markets maybe more efficiently or effectively. Have you thought about those broader implications to business?
Absolutely, and it's an area of high investment on our side for that, to ensure that we are building for the future in that regard. And I think some of it's to be seen in terms of reactions from our clients and what the space will look like more broadly. So far, it's created more opportunity than anything else, and there's a lot going on. But
there was maybe one thing that was interesting I have the privilege to have been at BCG for more than 30 years, so I can tell you that in 1993, when I joined, the business was a bit different. We had just calculators, we didn't even have laptop. So I've seen, let's say, some changes. And what was interesting in our previous experiment is that when we were asking the consultants whether they were feeling that they were afraid because maybe the strategy or problem solving will be done, they were saying, we're not that afraid because we believe there are some other things to do where we are still, for instance, change management becomes very important. So maybe I tend to believe that the role of a consulting firm is to try to help accelerate the rate of learning on what creates a source of competitive advantage, and maybe being able to adopt these technologies and lift their power is the new source of competitive advantage. And therefore, our job is to help these companies accelerate this competitive advantage. So you choose because I'm...
Has this research started to shape BCG's talent strategy in any different ways already? I mean, you're working with clients on talent strategy, but does it broaden the aperture of who you think you can look at? Does it shift the sort of skills that you're seeking? Or is it all just sort of early stage?
And already, it is still early stage. All of this is early stage for us, but already down to recruiting. And what does an interview look like for someone who writes code? Do we let them use ChatGPT or not? And I think an implication for us from this work is that we should let them use this. This will be part of the workflow going forward. And then of course we're thinking about this again, the structure of how the talent, the shape of our sort of talent model. But there are some big unanswered questions, especially like Francois hinted at. How do we promote? Like, where do they get the experience if they have? It's again, more questions than answers so far. But
I just want to comment here. With all the hype surrounding technology, I think we're a little bit overestimating the actual capabilities of the systems, right? It's still, today, you can think about it as a search engine that is capable of mashing up the data, right? Connecting certain pieces that it has seen previously. So what I'm trying to say, it's the originality of the ideas, whether you're going to be thinking about strategy or anything else, it cannot provide or generate very original ideas. So what you're going to see if you use it a lot, that it can combine things that previously existed, right? Maybe cut and paste, right? Maybe putting them slightly different. If that's what you're after, this technology is great. But if you're expecting it to come up with something completely original that never existed before, that never existed in all that literature and all that information that it has ingested, it's not going to do it. It's not magic. It's actually matrix multiplications. So it is a technology that it allows us to access information that has been previously created by all of us. And I think that's we need to keep in mind that.
That's true, but I don't know your experience, but I would not say that very often I came with quantum physics. So I mean it's. And we have a paper, so another teaser that will come on with MIT SMR, which is on the previous one, the creativity, where we see that ChatGPT is actually, as you said, a quality leveler, meaning that you don't get the very great ideas, but you cut the tail. Meaning that if you want to have a large number of good enough ideas, human and generative AI, and I'm saying human and generative AI, not just AI, basically is extremely powerful. Yes, you had a question.
So I'm actually also a BCG alum. The study is very interesting, but I'm actually curious if you've been trying to harm not just the data analysts, but even the consultants, let's say, with Gen AI tools. How do you think about balancing the fact that Gen AI still hallucinates? So for example, how good do you feel it's for idea generation versus a preliminary rough draft that the human can improve upon versus a kind of like a second set of eyes to try to spot issues in the work of the human?
Right now, we've armed pretty much the whole firm with generative AI tools. right? Not just data scientists or analysts or engineers, even though they were definitely early adopters. Yes, it does hallucinate, and part of the change management journey for us has been education around that and how to actually work effectively with it. And so there are different patterns. I think delegating work to it is successful to a degree as long as it is a first draft. It is certainly not, to Leanne's point over here, not up to the task for doing full, final drafts on things. And then also as an editor or a sort of peer and working on things is quite effective. But, these things are not databases. And if you treat them as such, you would be very, very disappointed, right? But there's a ton of questions. We can talk about this after if you're here. That's a long time.
So I'm still ruminating on the comment earlier today about NVIDIA's CEO, who of course is running his business using AI with a span of control of 30 to 40 people, virtually eliminating one-on-ones. And what came to mind is you're talking about implications for change management that also suggest implications to culture.
Yeah.
How do you scale culture? How do you, to what this woman said, inculcate discernment, often which is done through a thick culture, in an environment where AI is ascendant? What are some of your hypotheses as a company that also advises your clients on building culture?
So on culture and coming back to the virtuous cycle, I can give you, it's not generative AI, it's not related to that, but having worked for a company where, for instance, it was for a next best action. It's a company that has 1 million SKUs, and when you are a young salesperson, basically you don't know, and you say, oh, they asked for this, what could I propose? And you go to the, let's say, elder people to try to get information. And these elder people, they say, oh, I don't want to answer, they are so pink. And then we created a next best action algorithm. And it was funny to see that the elder people were more willing to train the machine than to provide solutions to their young colleagues. And it was, I'm just kind of here, it's reality. It's a fact. And so can you imagine the impact on the culture? Because instead of having one-on-one and let's say people not willing, versus you have everything that is in one algorithm where you can train and that you can share with everyone. And so it created a very different culture. So I think that we are, basically AI can help the culture. So very often we believe that we need to change culture to adapt to AI, but really I would say it's almost the other way around. AI can help change culture in a positive way.
And look at just the professional identity. I don't know if you can read the small font up here, but these are really positive results on professional identity and sort of morale that does play a role in culture. At least to date, when we work on it this way, we see positive impacts. But I think we also need to be quite intentional about how we work with it, because I think just throwing these things out into the wild and then expecting people to work effectively, especially if they start making mistakes or if it has negative, ramifications for them, should be counterproductive.
No, please go ahead. You're fine. Thank you.
I thought one of the most interesting findings was that users of this are not necessarily upskilling or I'll say getting smarter or more creative or what have you. If we think about the next generation of, let's say, middle school, high school, and college students who are using this, I'm on the board of a college and they're struggling right now with just within the English department, like, should you use this or not? Some people think it's the end of the world and will destroy creativity. Some people think it's the greatest thing ever, and we don't know. The question is if you're using these as a matter of your education process, are you actually learning anything? Are you getting, creative? You learning how to think? All the things that college and high school were supposed to make you do, is this taking it away from you? And I think the jury's out on this.
I get more questions than answers on that one too. I don't think we're going to answer that with this.
But I think, again, in my perspective, and we have a great artist here tonight, but is working on these topics, but you will see her on stage later today. Basically, what we do is, it depends on how you use it. Do you use it as a buddy? And therefore, you can maybe come to something really of a higher level. So I think if I were in a college, I would not ban it, because life will be made with it. So maybe you need to, and coming back to the recruiting question that we are, and how we are using it. Of course, our consultants will be able, and I'm trying to use this as an example for your question. Of course, our consultants will still face clients, have to answer with clients eye to eye, and so on. So of course, we keep our recruiting, some of our recruiting, let's say, interviews, one individual to one individual with no ChatGPT help. But then, as you said, for some of the tasks, because when you will do some of these things, you will have ChatGPT, and we see that the way you behave on this without ChatGPT is not predictive of the way you will behave with ChatGPT, meaning that you have people below average when they don't use ChatGPT that are clearly above average when they use ChatGPT. So you need to have interviews where basically people can have access to it. And this is this combination. So in your college, maybe you should think about how do you see the future of what they could have to do in terms of business, and try to have courses where they cannot use them, they cannot use it, and others where they will use it. So it's maybe a mix of it. And I would like to say, Emma, just 1 minute. Just 1 minute. We don't live like this.
I want everybody to get to know Emma. She has been an amazing resource on this study. Emma, would you like to, also she just recently defended her dissertation and is officially Dr. Emma
Yes, I've been very happy to be working with these lovely people in this study, and I think we'll have a very exciting paper for any academics here coming out of it. So keep your eyes peeled.
One exciting.
Yes.
What I'm struggling with actually is everything that I've heard, and we're talking about how we're going to use AI to personalize the experience. But I see from an employee perspective, we're actually depersonalizing it a little bit. And I think that's the challenge. How do you put in your change management? How do you layer on that? We all talk about high touch, high tech, and the collaboration between both. And how do you actually create that to make sure that, yes, you're creating that personalization for your customer by leveraging AI, but not at the disadvantage of the employee.
I would tend to maybe disagree a bit with that. Please go ahead, Lisa.
Oh, sorry. One thing I'll just point out is that when you're implementing, and this, Francois, I would love your perspective on this, but when you're implementing AI, you need to be very intentional about benefiting your employees' professional identity across the board. And we see three things in people's professional identity that are very important: their sense of competence, their sense of autonomy, and their sense of connection with the people around them. And so as you're implementing AI, you need to, in order to get that virtuous cycle that Francois was pointing out, you actually have to intentionally, carefully design each of those to make sure that you are not eliminating any of them. And so one of the things, has nothing to do with generative AI, but we did see when implementing AI in call centers, et cetera, you had to redesign the workflow of people so that they still ran into each other. And other things like that, but you have more experience.
No, not more experience than you have. And it's back to what you were saying earlier on about, okay, we can eliminate the 4 hours you were referring to. We will have to, because people can do higher value things, but actually it's tiring to do higher value things or more stressful when you're in the call center, because when you have something, it's boring, but you think about other things. And I think it's very important for companies, organizations to give back part of the productivity gain to their employees. But it will be a mix. It's not just that. It's, as you said, we made sure, for instance, it was in a banking call center, to make sure that people would see each other more often. So we make sure that the breaks were at the same time, and it was improving the retention rate, and it was improving the quality of the answers. So all of that needs to be thought through, and it's really our perspective. We believe that at the moment, the key point is not about optimizing the technology, it's about optimizing the way humans use this technology. We have 1 minute. I think.
We have like both raise your hands at the same time. All right.
Yeah.
I've already asked a question, it's fine, go ahead.
Well, so I know you mentioned, your best practices in prompt engineering that you gave. But how do you account for the disparity in the efficacy of the prompt engineering in getting desirable results or improving output? And then how do you make a model or a framework for consistency?
We could talk for again hours on this one alone. I'm actually not a huge proponent of investing too much into prompt engineering right now. Like, I don't think it's going to be necessary for very long. Already, we're using models to engineer prompts for other models. Like, I think this is going to get to a point where you just express intent in any way, and it's going to get better. Yeah, Leah, you're skeptical. Yeah, please.
So on BCG management, you're making a presentation. What changes are we going to make as a result of the work that you've done?
Should we go to the slide?
Yeah, go to the next slide.
Great segue. Yeah, and we're not going to walk through every one of these, I think, in depth, but I think it does have implications across, again, the workforce planning. We have some ideas already that it's going to maybe level the playing field a bit in terms of who we go and recruit and how we go about recruiting, as Francois was talking about, including some generative AI into the recruiting process, into the interview process. Okay. Learning and development, I think right now it's clear that we need to put more thought into how we roll out these systems, because we can't just expect them, again, off the shelf with limited time at least, to teach people what tasks they don't understand already.
We will as well have the opportunity to redesign our teams for different assignments. Right. Maybe with more, let's say, specialists or more senior data scientists able to supervise with maybe or coming a bit later in the process and so on, while some of work will have been done by other consultants. We will have as well to think about our development and our promotions. What do we see, and our criteria will be something we'll work on.
This is 10 days of thinking on this. There's a lot more to come.
Actually, we did well in 10 days.
Do you think it'll allow you to take on more work than you otherwise with the same amount of people?
Honestly, I'm back to my 30 years at BCG. Today, our proposals are the equivalent of a 6-week case when I started. This is not the same job, but this is an industry that will drastically evolve. So, it's, and I think this is one of my arguments with Ethan Mollick that says, this is the end of consulting, everyone will have the best prompt and so on. I don't believe it, at least not for the moment, for the reason I was mentioning about the learning curves. But I think we need to see that, and it is an evolving process. This is an organic, the world is organic. Look at what happened let's say a century ago, we had 40% of our people who were farmers.
Right.
Yeah. Okay? That's the case today.
Yeah, I'll get later on.
So
Last question.
I do come from consulting, and I understand very well the pressure, especially with Gen AI in consulting, because the consultant in the end adds value to the client, provides the answers, is the support, does everything for the client. So I feel like right now is the part that how do we make the employee happy and fun working? But in the meantime, we don't want to be perceived as we're providing answers to our clients through ChatGPT. So how does BCG balance this between client and employees?
Maybe we have a different answer, so please, and I will tell you. I will take a different one.
It's the way that that we are working with the technology. It is a tool to get to an outcome, and the outcome is not always necessarily the smart answer. Right? Like if our clients can go into ChatGPT and get the answer, great, do that. Right? That's perfect. I think what we find is, to Francois' point, change is more of what we spend our time doing now, and that is just really, really not easy.
And honestly, I don't care if we use ChatGPT, and I'm very happy to tell it to the client, as long as we make sure that it is in an environment that will provide safety of its information and so on, his data and so on. But otherwise, let's do it the way we want. The objective is to have the best answer we can provide to the client. I would not say whatever it costs, but
Has it ever happened that a client will disagree with you and say, for example, that I search in ChatGPT and ChatGPT will give me
you know,
a different answer from
in 1999 or 2000, people were predicting that you don't need consultants anymore because everything is on the web. And we love clients to argue. ChatGPT might be, they have other people who can tell them, or I have an advisor that tells me something different. Up to us to prove what we believe.
I'll just add to that and say ChatGPT is trained on all the business stuff. I mean, if you have a business student in your teams, do you need a consultant? And I think the answer is yes, because you still need people to come in and deeply understand your context in a way that, as Leonid had alluded to, there's only so much ChatGPT can actually do.
But we're also not just taking that for granted. We are investing heavily into building out technology to help arm our teams and make them more effective at what they do. But again, catch us later if you want to chat more.
Thank you,